Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to the Hal Lindsey Report. There's been so much controversy about the Cordoba Mosque and that Ground Zero and so forth, and I know you've heard a lot about it, but there are a few things that I believe are very important to say, and there are other issues that are just very important tonight, so please give attention and listen carefully. What if you were a Christian and no one could tell? Worse, what if you claimed to be a Christian and nobody believed you? What would that say about your Christian witness? What if you were the most closely scrutinized person on the planet and everything you did was put under a microscope? What if your comings and goings were so endlessly fascinating that merely taking kids to the ice cream store for ice cream is a major media event? If your entire life were played out under the harsh glare of the media spotlight, could anybody tell from watching whether or not you were a follower of Christ? Today, there's a growing debate about whether President Barack Hussein Obama is a Christian or a Muslim. You know, it reminds me of the old preacher who asked his congregation, if you were arrested and charged with being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? The question was intended to make them think about their personal witness for Christ. And though it's hypothetical, it may not be so for long. During the campaign, Senator Obama didn't simply declare himself a Christian. He went further than that. He banned the use of his full name, Hussein. And the media went along with it on pain of being declared either racist or an Islamophobe. The campaign also dispatched his minions to verify Mr. Obama's Christianity. He testified that Reverend Jeremiah Wright had led him to Christ. The senator made a particular point of insisting that he had been a faithful church member for 20 years. Of course, that asset became somewhat of a liability when he suddenly discovered that Reverend Wright was an anti-American racist who believes white people are devils and that September 11th was a consequence of America's chickens coming home to roost. But whenever possible, the candidate made a point of either telling people he was a Christian or sending out other people to remind us that he was a Christian. Last week, the presidential party traveled to Martha's Vineyard for a getaway. Aboard Air Force One, White House spokesman Bill Burton told reporters, "The president is obviously a Christian. He prays every day." What prompted Burton to make that explanation? It was the release of a recent poll, a poll that essentially asked that old preacher's rhetorical question, if you were arrested and charged with being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? A Pew Research poll conducted before the Ground Zero Mosque controversy asked Americans about Mr. Obama's religion. After observing him for the past 18 months in office, 1 in 5 Americans, or 20%, believed he is actually a Muslim. In a separate poll conducted by Time magazine after the president weighed in with his expression of support for the Ground Zero Mosque, that number jumps to 1 in 4, or 25%. Now, in neither poll did a majority of Americans say they believe President Obama is a Christian. Apparently, there just isn't enough evidence to convict him of that charge. Alan Cooperman, the Pew Forum's Associate Director for Research, said the poll might merely reflect the suggestion in the media and elsewhere that President Obama is really a Muslim. That might have explained it back when Obama was a senator campaigning to be president. But since his election, the White House has left no stone unturned in his quest to be recognized as a Christian. Other data suggests that after witnessing his performance as a Christian in office for some 20 months now, the number of Americans who believe the president is really a Muslim has increased 10%. Asked why they think that, 60% said They heard it from the media, though the mainstream media has carefully avoided the subject. 11% said they came to that conclusion by watching and listening to Obama himself. When, during his first election campaign, former President George W. Bush declared that the person who most profoundly affected his life was Jesus Christ, the backlash almost derailed his campaign. As president, when he launched his faith-based initiatives, the media warned of a potentially unconstitutional Christian takeover. The sincerity of Mr. Bush's confession of faith in Jesus Christ has never been in doubt as far as the media was concerned. Offhand, I can't recall any White House spokesman having to reassure reporters that the president really was a Christian. If anything, Bush's Christianity was taken at face value and constantly thrown back at him as a threat to our Constitution and a political liability. And remember Attorney General John Ashcroft, who held personal Bible studies in his office? He was brutally condemned by the media and the left. Many demanded his resignation. However, in President Obama's case, it seems to make little difference that he has invested so much effort in convincing us that he is a Christian. And that seems strange since America now has such an anti-Christian bias. Today, anyone elected to a high political position who overtly practices Christianity is usually castigated and accused of endangering the country by trying to force obedience to Christian principles. Perish the thought. But in Mr. Obama's case, people seem to be completely unconcerned with whether he is a Christian or not, until now. Now, there seems to be a growing, nagging uneasiness about the possibility that he might actually be a Muslim. But the bigger story here isn't whether the president is a Muslim. The big story here should be, if Mr. Obama is truly a Muslim at heart, why is he hiding it? From day one, President Obama has made the defense of Islam a key priority of his administration. Kicking off his famous World Apology Tour last year in Istanbul, then in Cairo, he apologized to the Muslim world for the sins and mistakes of America. He denied America was a Christian country and even suggested America was one of the world's largest Muslim countries. He made that claim despite official U.S. government statistics that place America's Islamic population at about 0.7% of the total population. The president also has spoken often about his Muslim background and that his family includes followers of Islam. He speaks of his youth in Indonesia, his study of the Quran, and his opinion that the Islamic call to prayer at sunset is the prettiest sound on earth. So the question mark concerning the president's religious beliefs were primarily raised not by the media's suppression or suppressed opinion, but rather by the media's reporting of the president's own words. You know, the real question that should be raised is this: if Islam is really tolerant and peaceful, and if the jihadists really are just a teeny percentage of radicals, and they're not representative of Islam, then who cares? If President Obama is a Muslim or not, what difference does it make? Why does it bother the White House so much for 25% of the Americans to think he may be a closet Muslim? If Islam is no threat, then we have no reason to feel threatened, do we? What we are now witnessing is reality running smack into the wall of political correctness. In the world according to PC, Islam is one of the three great monotheistic religions on a par with Judaism and Christianity. It is a religion of peace, love, and tolerance as it goes. True Islam accepts and respects all other religions. The jihadists are extreme cultists that have perverted real Islam. These platitudes are continually repeated like the brainless rehearsing of a religious mantra. In the real world, there is about as much evidence to support the claims of Islamic tolerance as there is to support the notion of intelligent life in the Congress. There are no pluralistic Islamic societies. Saudi Arabia, birthplace of Islam and home to its holiest monuments and treasures, is hardly a bastion of tolerance. In Saudi Arabia, it is a capital offense. That means you can be executed to convert from Islam to any other religion. Any other religion at all. In Iran and Afghanistan today, women accused of adultery are buried in the ground from the waist down, while jeering crowds throw rocks at their heads and upper body until they are finally battered to death. Before the West deposed the Taliban, those practitioners of hardline Islam, girls could not even be educated. Women were treated worse than second-class citizens. They were considered possessions. While Islamic charities build mosques in New York City, they also fund flotillas aimed at breaking the Israeli blockade of Hamas. They provide survivor benefits as a reward to the families of suicide bombers. But yet, these charities don't provide relief to world victims of natural disasters in any meaningful way. Of the total collected by the United Nations to fund relief efforts in quake-stricken Haiti, only 0.1% came from the Islamic world. That's 1/10 of 1%. Pakistan, a Muslim nation, is currently in the midst of the worst flooding in that country's history. They've never seen anything like it. Estimates range as high as 5 million, 20% of all Pakistanis are homeless. The death toll has yet to be finalized, but will surely reach into the thousands. Yet the Organization of Islamic Conference, which represents 57 Islamic nations, including some of the richest oil economies in the world, are hardly helping Pakistan at all. By comparison, the three largest contributors to Pakistan's relief are the United States, Britain, and Canada. Australia, who's not a real wealthy country, contributed 4 times as much as the oil-rich United Arab Emirates. The Canadian province of Saskatchewan alone contributed more to Pakistani relief than did the government of Iran. To me, this bears witness to the kind of merciful attitude Islam actually creates. I'll be back after this message. Here on the Hal Lindsey Report, I try to inform you about the raging battles for the soul and future of these United States. The ferocity of the attacks against your heritage and our liberties as Christians and Americans is almost unbelievable. But you won't hear about this in the mainstream media. That's why I need your help to spread the word each week. Keep the Hal Lindsey Report on the air by sending your tax-deductible gifts to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74147. You can also support the program by visiting my website, hallindsey.com, or simply phone toll-free 1-888-RAPTURE. As I reported last week, President Obama recently hosted what didn't become an annual White House Ramadan celebration until after the attacks on September 11, 2001. And by the way, if you've watched this program over the years, you'll know that I was very critical of President Bush for starting the tradition. Speaking at the dinner in the White House, the president declared that mainstream Islam is a good, peace-loving religion. But Muslim jihadists are apostates who have perverted the true meaning of Islam. Instead of eliciting gasps of horror at this blatant violation of the liberals' own doctrine of separation of church and state, he got a standing ovation for advocating a certain sect of a religion. It was at this iftar dinner that the president announced his support for the construction of the Ground Zero Mosque.